Well, I think he has a long-term objective and a short-term objective. I think the long-term objective is to restore as much of the former Soviet Union, the fall of which he called the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century, to restore as much of it as possible, to push out west and north and south from Russia, and to either exert direct control over countries or to have significant influence, as he now does with Belarus. That's the long-term goal. The short-term goal, I think, continues to be the takeover of Ukraine through the use of mass, large-scale military force. And unfortunately, what I projected to happen is now happening, where you're seeing large-scale shelling of major Ukrainian cities, in particular Kharkiv and Kiev. So I think, unfortunately, it's going to get worse quite a bit before it gets better.
Barry, tell me this: the Ukrainian-Russia meeting, the delegations between the two sides that's happening on the Belarusian border. Do you think it's a path forward, or just a political sideshow?
I think one can never tell when you're dealing with the strategy of someone like Putin. But I think it's always useful to be talking, but you never can tell. And I think the fact that Russian forces have not brought their full weight to bear yet, I think you're seeing more of that, but there's even a lot more to come. I think that one should not expect any, wonderful outcomes from those talks in the near term, because Russia has not yet fully engaged its military. So I think it's probably hoping, by talks, Europe will reduce sanctions, the US and NATO will reduce what they're doing as well, Ukraine will ease off from its resistance. That's not going to happen. But my guess is that's what Russia's objective is, because it's now going in much harder with military force. And it's a type of military force that is causing significant civilian casualties. Yeah. We're talking about shelling city blocks with artillery and causing a lot of damage and loss of life. It's terrible to see.
It is indeed. Barry, in the lead up to this conflict, many analysts were saying that President Putin had the upper hand of sorts. I mean, almost 6 days into the actual conflict, his military is, I think it's fair to say, is underperforming. It's not a blitzkrieg. It's a much slower advance. He seems to be ever so isolated in the international community. Has his stock plummeted, or is this all part of his master plan?
Well, there's no doubt that he didn't expect these unprecedented unified responses on freezing Russian reserves, on Germany announcing the most significant increase in its defense budget since I cannot remember when, in the new government under Mr. Schultz. So there's no way that he predicted the level of intensity of the response, the unified response between the U.S. and Europe in particular, but others, nor of the Ukrainian resistance, which has been valiant and amazing so far. But as I said, he's not losing a whole lot. His military is still advancing, unfortunately, into major Ukrainian cities. The map is looking more red rather than less, and that's a big, big worry. So even though he's isolated relatively in his decision-making style, I think he's not so isolated that he's not going to continue to press the military advance.